Before we start, just one more thing. Can you hear me correctly? Is everything clear? Excellent. This is what I'll just tap the subs here, and we should be ready. This is going to be recorded if nobody here opposes it, and that way we can share it afterwards. All right. Well, I think that we should start at least with refuge. And while we are doing refuge, the meditation, you will join in a little bit. Then we'll just so let's join in. And let's start with the refuge that Dudjom Lingpa most liked, which is the old school refuge of the garden. Right? So we go. All sentient beings and myself take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. Take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and in the Sangha. Take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha until enlightenment is reached. And now the Bodhicitta section say, by the merit of giving and all the other paramitas, we all swiftly attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. By the merit of giving and all the other paramitas, we swiftly attain enlightenment for the merit. By the merit of giving and all the other paramitas, we swiftly attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Thank you so much for joining me today in a milestone, at least for Bula, in that we are doing the first official teaching of Dudjom Lingpa's work that we have translated and organized, and we're going to keep organizing. There's a lot of it. So today I want to always tell you a little bit about who was Dudjom Lingpa, why is he important. But as always, this is not an important. We're going to talk a little bit about his life, his works. We're going to read his works, and I'm going to try to explain them. Please feel free to jump in. Please feel free to discuss, do whatever you want to do. This is well, it is formal teaching. It's also something that probably there's going to be a lot of terms involved that you might not know. Always, there's no problem in interrupting as long as we're not doing a formal meditation or ritual. Feel more than free. Discuss, interrupt. The idea is that everyone has a good time, and we all learn a little bit more about this wonderful being. So, shall we start? Any question, any comment before we start? So, then let's go. I'll share my screen, and the first thing I'm going to do, because this I'm not here in the university right now. I am at house, but no, it's difficult to get university out of me. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation that contextualizes Dudjom Lingpa. Right? I'm sorry, but it's like it's too strong for me. This is something that's too much. So let me just share here my entire screen. Yeah, so you should be. Oh, sorry. It won't share itself. My apologies. This is something that's been happening to me. So if at any point you feel that I lose the screen, please let me know. Is that I'm sorry, are you seeing my screen or just seeing like
No, not the
and
screen. Just that little emoji con.
Your
okay?
logo.
So yeah, so let's stop presenting again and let's. It's so bizarre. It's doing this a lot lately.
Pranam Namaskar.
Save now. Now you're seeing my screen, right? Excellent.
Yes, yes.
Apologize to everyone. I do this for a living and still I'm always being tripped. So sorry, I apologize. So who was this Dudjom Lingpa guy that we have been talking about, right? Well, I'm going to try to give you a brief idea. You know probably that he's within the same chain of emanations as myself, but it's very unusual. One thing that happens is that within the doodle, right, that starts from Dudjom Lingpa and starts going to Dudjom Lingpa, everyone else blind. There is kind of a lot of threats that are repeated. Let's call it circumstances. As I always tell people when they ask me what gets transmitted from life to life, there are mainly vows and let's call it aesthetic themes, right? Choices, ways of interacting with the world. That's what gets most. In Dudjom Lingpa, there is a smaller subset of the whole doodle thing. But that smaller subset, because it gets compressed, gets pushed to the max in a lot of ways. So let me start first with the most basic facts, right? He was born in Golok, in what is now Xinjiang in China, in the Amdo Valley, right? The Ando region. And this was interesting. He was recognized about very young, very early, as an emanation of Dzogchen and which is one of the 25 disciples of Patmos Baba. So this made him a proper term. However, he was extremely, I don't want to underemphasize, so let me say genocidally wrathful from a very early age, which made any kind of institutional relationship very different. He started, yes, Lavajin.
Oh no, sorry, Lama. I was gonna put up a hand symbol of heavy metal.
Oh, I got the okay, no problem. Yes, essentially, but yes, very much. He's had from very young a lot of visions, impressed visions, but also he had a very bad relationship with almost anyone who tried to straight up teach him. In the sense of tackling them, throwing things at them, being very angry, at the same time very wild, but with a lot of patience. So in a way, he's kind of the archetypical wild Joe. Is this? I talk a lot about this, and I'm going to talk more now that I'm traveling to Mexico to give some talks at universities as part of our Mara Roast, in which Vajrayana in India is a very different thing. Let's call it in the 10th century, right? It's a very different thing than what Vajrayana is on the 19th century in Tibet. In 10th century in India, Vajrayana was basically the terrorist kind of movement, right? It was the resistance to the idea of Varna, of caste, the idea of, well, the Muslim movement in India. It was a very wild, and almost like the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars, right? Small ulas, which means clans, but essentially operated as cells, right? Fighting a little bit the power that was, and that they lost the fight, right? As we know, in India, most of the great Vajrayana centers, the Pala Empire and everything else were destroyed. However, this kind of mindset, when it goes to Tibet, has to change. In Tibet, it becomes the power. So now, when the rebels, right, topple the empire and take over the republic, you're going to get bureaucratic rebels. You're going to get rebels who drag their feet, and they feel bourgeois, and they want to, like all bourgeoisie, want to increase their comfort in lives. So slowly, Vajrayana becomes more settled, more domesticated. Dudjom Lingpa is very much a throwback to this kind of wild and visionary things, to the point that, as we're going to see later on, for a long time he's thought to be just a madman, not a real Turk. Even though he was recognized fairly early on at the beginning because of the vision, but then he's dismissed for a long time until the recognition becomes official at the end of his life. Right? Therefore, he gives one of the best warnings about being famous as a Vajrayana teacher, which is if you do things all right, people will hate you, people will find you disruptive, and people will find you a source of conflict. However, if at the end of your life you start hearing clapping, this is not good. This is the hooves of the messengers of Mara who come to kill you. Sorry, the messengers of Yama who come to kill you, right? So he was this kind of very, very strange turtle. But what is turtle nonetheless, right? Some of you might not be quite understanding what this means when we say he's a turtle. So a turtle is not just someone who sees things in pure visions, but it's someone who has this connection to the 25 disciples of Padmasambhava, and he reveals a particular series of visions that are concealed, the story goes, by Padmasambhava and Yeshe Sogyal for the benefit of future generations, right? Sometimes it arises with some sign, you go and excavate and find a statue or a text, but 99% of the times these arise in pure visions. Now, what difference is there between someone who reveals Upanishads, right, and also like sees a communication, a pure vision from the Buddhas, and someone who was certain? Usually, it is a state mandated difference, right? In which these 25 turtles have to be related to a particular turtle, who has to relate to a particular turtle, who in the end is part of the 25, right? And the pure vision lineage basically comes from Padmasambhava and Yeshe Sogyal to Dudjom Lingpa, to Dorje, Dudjom Lingpa, his son and his sons and daughters, and his emanation to Dudjom Rinpoche, to basically ourselves and the rest of the people that we Dudjom family hold with this kind of transmissions. We tend to hold this very close. And what are the main revelations that he did? He did a 21 volume, which covers a lot of things. We're going to see it. But the main thing to understand is that all these teachings, because they are attributed to Padmasambhava and Yeshe Sogyal, are, for these terms, continuous revelations of Padmasambhava and Yeshe Sogyal, right? The difference is, let's say, someone has an Upadesha, anyone that has a level of attainment can have an Upadesha. That's wonderful. That's new teaching, right? From Buddhas. However, to be considered part of the Padmasambhava canon, it should be connected to that kind of transmissions. Now, the Dudjom is not the only lineage of transmission that has this. Remember, there were 25 disciples. Especially in the Enigma, there is a wealth, an absolutely massive wealth of teachings in Upanishads. So if you want to practice something that has Padmasambhava's seal of approval, there is a lot to choose from. Oh, sorry. So basically, how was his life? His life was very, very eventful, right? So he was born in 1835, as we said. By the 1850s, he starts having a lot of regulations. There is an autobiography called The Clear Mirror, which he writes. It is the most fantastic and bizarre read. Don't read it until you have the translations, because it has Dudjom Lingpa, again, very well person, right? Throwback to old style Mahasiddha. Really kind of, his philosophy is either you come enlightened very fast, or you go to the worst of Vajra hells. Now, we might say, hey, I like this. This is because you're thinking, oh no, I'm going to get enlightened very fast. The chances are you're going to go to Vajra hell. That's why the way of teaching this, we're going to do it in a very careful manner, right? But if you find yourself with the transmissions and you read the autobiography, is hilarious. I'm going to paraphrase, not to, again, quote a very heavily protected text, but essentially it's kind of like, okay, today is Sunday, right? I woke up, there were 10 million Dakinis fighting to have sex with me. I said, you know, I don't have time to this shit. I have to kick the demon prince ass, that demon prince band that is there, and he goes and fights the demon prince. Then he has breakfast, and his day really starts, right? He does a massive amount of drugs and sex. Then he just takes his constitutional. A pair of Jaxas are basically fighting with armies, and he says, "I had to beat them." You know, this is my life. It's like that. It's like constant bizarre happenings. But just to make sure that this sounds like someone just being high and writing whatever they came to their mind. He was very much an active person in this. There is a famous episode there in which there is this group of slavers who enslave and rape young people, right? They just castrate the boys, rape the girls, and make them having a horrible life. So he goes and it's like, I'm going to do a Bhadragilaya ritual to kill them. He does a divination later, and the divination comes well. They also have sorcerers, so it may take a while for it to give it. And he's like, I don't have time for that. So he straps on a sword, goes, waits until sends them like something to drink. When they're drunk, he just alone goes into their camp, kills everyone, right? And frees the people. Very active person. Very active person. And also a very pragmatic sorcerer. He fights everyone. Fights everyone all the time. And here comes the problem. Because he's so active, because he's so violent. Exactly. He's so violent and he's so wrathful. A lot of the contemporary teachers and young control, they're like, this is not Buddhism. This is just a madman. It's like, this guy like 99% of his writing fall into three camps. Camp one, which is a minuscule thing, it's, I'm going to do basic Buddhism teachings, right? Minimum part of it. Still, it is there. And when you're going to see when he talks about, problems that Buddhists has, he's a very good Buddhist teacher. He's not like someone who's, so you come and say, hey, I cannot focus my mind in shamatha. He does not going to say, kill a demon or something like that. He's going to say, okay, show me the problem. Just like any Buddhist teacher. Let's see what's your posture. Let's see how you focus on the particular object. Second part, which is very extremely advanced, but there's not that much. It's the Dzogchen text, which we're going to cover over. This part is amazing. It's amazing Dzogchen writing, right? And the majority of his work, it's straight up magic. And it's usually kill everyone type of magic. That's the main problem with teaching him. His solution to any problem is to find the biggest stick and beat the problem into submission. So it makes it difficult for people to teach it, especially in a modern context, in which all these things are not so much associated with Buddhism. But this was not our problem. This was the problem that happened in Tibet itself. even Tibetan Lamas, in a moment in which we're talking about the time of Pavonka, we're talking about the time of fall of the Qing Empire, right? Which made the Manchus. We're talking on the time of the young husband inflation. We're talking in the time of the Great Game. It's a very violent time in Tibet, where there is bandits, there is rogue states, there is armies, there is invasion, there's British Empire trying to break into Tibet. Even in that time, everyone looked at him and said, "Hey guys, this is too much. This is too much." So what happened was that nobody wanted to kind of acknowledge him as a Buddhist teacher. And what started happening is students started achieving rainbow body one after the other. Depending on the counts, it's 11 or 13 students, but they all achieved rainbow body, and everyone started having this. So at some point, Konku started saying, "Hey, this is working." I don't know how he did this method, but this is working. So he sent a letter to basically include him into his major compilation of the highest Buddhist work. But Dudjom Lingpa, being Dudjom Lingpa, declined. Says, "You didn't want to be part." No, now that I'm famous, no, right? At that point, he has traveled a lot, and his fame has created multiple lines of translation, right? And then, at almost a very long age for someone like him, right? He, almost 70 years old, he passed in Paranirvana. And the way in which he passed Paranirvana is it's wonderful. It is very much like Dudjom Lingpa. It's like he's dying. You know he's dying, right? He's going to pass. And he's like, "Well, guys, I'm going to go. So I taught you everything. Any last request?" And his students are like, "Well, know that you mentioned, teacher, you're wonderful. You're wonderful. Okay. And yeah, we really don't want to bother you with this. But," and Dudjom Lingpa, being Dudjom Lingpa, is like, "Hey guys, I don't have all day. I'm dying. Like, spit it out." And they're like, "Could you be less of an asshole next time you come around? It's like less of a violent madman." And he was like, "What?" And they're like, yeah, it's just, like the swords and the leaping and the screaming at night and the demon fighting. It's a little bit of a lot. He's like, "But did you see everyone who got like rainbow body out of this? And you really want to become like a Buddha? You really want to be a Buddha?" They're like, yeah, but you could do it a little bit like more gently, right? And he's like, "Oh, you bastards, I'm going to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be so boring next time that you're going to want to kill yourself." Therefore, his next emanation, Dudjom Rinpoche, which was the actual head of the Nyingma lineage, which is not bad for someone who was the emanation of, like a lot of praise of madman. He was so polite and he was so like gentle that everyone thought, "This cannot be. This is wrong." Until his actual students say, "No, this was us. We asking him, this for this." So it's a wonderful lesson of you can always get what you want, but you may not like. He produces in his life a lot of visions, as we say. So he produces 21 volumes of collected work. Now, the main thing that differentiates him from someone like Dudjom Rinpoche or someone like Mipham is that his work is consistently about either Dzogchen or a lot of rituals, right? Instead of someone like, for example, Mipham, who writes long and detailed explanations of how things work, right? Or, for example, something I read the other day, a wonderful manual of how to do funerary calculations for astrology or things like this. He's really not that into. He's not also into over-explaining things like Dudjom Rinpoche is. or having debates with other teachers on the finer points of dialectics, like Sapan, for example, right? Pretty much what he does is he writes a lot of Dzogchen. He writes root tantras of Dzogchen. Right? He writes guru sadhanas, a lot of guru sadhanas, a lot of songs of realizations, and whole volumes of protector cycles, right? And of course, perhaps the most famous of all is his volume 9, which is just a whole volume of subduing and working with demons, right? So pretty much, essentially, it's all metal. The whole thing is all metal. The only thing that usually it's a little bit different is the volume 18, in which I have translated 2 texts for today, which is the Song of Realization. In this, he teaches songs, try to explain to people what really means to be Buddhist. And these are mostly, they are surprisingly good Buddhist songs that you don't expect for him. And this is something that has always been the case in my translations of very famous Buddhist teachers who are controversial, like Ikkyu, for example, the Japanese Ikkyu. But you learn about Ikkyu's life, and it seems like he's rock raw every single day. But then when you go to his actual writings, or Drukpa Kunle, for example, the famous, right, sainted madman from 10, you're like, oh, he only wants to have sex, oh, you know, the flaming phalluses and everything else. Then you go to his actual teachings, and they're amazing, but they're also like Buddhist teachings, like, hey guys, you know, sit down, you know, just become, like, try to lose attachment. It's like, one thing that usually gets forgotten is that these people are very good, very accomplished Buddhists. Right? They're just not characters, bizarre characters in the landscape. They're just very good. So, because this is going to be, if I start going over every single one, it's going to be a lot. Right? And we'll just mention the basis of this of the teaching, especially Dzogchen teachings. Now, I'm not, because this requires power, and as Wes pointed out, I'm not going to basically explain everything, but just the general concepts. Then, when you practice, and when, at least with us, when you are P3 level or further up, you're going to get the complete teachings about this. But essentially, Dzogchen, if you're not completely sure what it is part of the highest set of teachings, alongside Mahamudra, which is Vajrayana, and it has several things. First is, for example, structure, which is a particular way, it's called cutting through, right? It's a way of cutting through to reach the original purity. And Rigpa, basically. Toyel is probably the most famous, right? It means crossing over, or school living, a little bit more literal. And this essentially has the visions. Whenever you see, you know, Dzogchen, like things with rainbows, this comes from here. The enlightenment of Dzogchen should be the rainbow body, right? Which is kind of a power practice in which you basically dissolve into the elements. And this is something that always keep in mind. Every single people of Buddhism and Subhikos has their own way of attaining enlightenment. For example, in the Paranirvana of the Arhats, right, which is from the Theravadan tradition, it's not the same as the Anuttara Samyak body of the Mahayana, which is not the same as the Mahamudra of the Anuttara Yoga Tantras, which is not the same as the rainbow body, right? Yes, they're all enlightened, but the way in which you become enlightened is very different. To the point that for us who are this path, if we become enlightened as an arhat, we have failed. This is something a little bit strange, but we have failed our vows. Our vows are to become bodhisattvas, right? All of this is explained in what's called the Gongpa Sanktam, which is probably the biggest cycle, this complete cycle, where it has more of a soteriological bent, right? in which basically what he does is works a lot with the Shina, which is essentially the ground of appearances, right? To understand that samsara and nirvana are not two, right? It's a very key concept. He has tantras in which he's explained a lot, which of course we cannot explain right now because of restrictions, but it is very important. All of this in his practice is very much played through the tantric roots. You know that the roots are different, and there's a way in which you see the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but because he is such a great writer of magic and sorcery tantra, he always does this through Guru, Deva, and Dhamma, right? So these are the main appearances. So far, so good. Next. So this comes to us, right? In this way, it starts with Padmasambhava Yeshe. So I made a very simple. There's a lot of steps in the middle, but this comes to this. To Padmasambhava Yeshe. So then comes basically first to Dudjom Lingpa, then to Dudjom. Then there's a lot of but there's a lot of emanations in the middle. Comes to Dudjom Lingpa, and now comes to us, right? That's the main way of the image, right? And the translation itself, as we have finished it, it's done already into English and into Spanish, right? The idea is that we always put, you're going to see it, you're going to get in this the English section, and then we're going to give the Spanish section late in the afternoon. But the idea is that if you're going to start practicing this, the first entry point are going to be the songs of realization, right? Which is probably the only part of the collection which is not crazy bizarre sorcery or preparation for it. After that, you can go to what is called the 5 preliminary topics, which is the 5 topics that constitute the first non-draw. Then you have a non-draw guide in the Dudjom, and from Dudjom Lingpa. A lot of inspiration for it. There's a lot of Pure Land practice, especially with Sandok Parley, the Pure Land of Padmasambhava. Once you get there, you get access to the author autobiography, which is already crazy enough, and there is a lot of even more crazy autobiography. And once you have passed that, the way to practice this should be through the sadhana cycles, right? And then after that, you go to the protector cycles, and eventually you get access to the root tantras of Dzogchen itself. That's kind of the way in which to approach this. Does that make sense, guys? Excellent. So, why this should matter to you, basically, and this will start with the texts themselves. The main thing is that because it's a translation that we have produced, that we have checked very much, and that we have already practiced, right? It is accessible because this nothing of this. There's a couple of things that are translated, which and this is not throwing shade to other translators. I do not think that the translations that you can find online in Amazon are very good, not because the translator is bad, but because it has been translated through the lens of the Yellow School, which makes things, has different categories, and basically just tries to also take a lot of the bizarre sorcerous things away to make it more like mainstream Buddhist, in which case for me it kind of defeats the point, right? But also this exactly Store of the Madness. These are texts that are not recent pieces, but things that are being practices, and it has been completely translated, which means that there is not going to be, as it often happens, that you get like a piece of sadhana or this sadhana for this part, but don't get it whole cycle. The idea is eventually to those people who can only translate the things. Does that make sense? Excellent. Well, so let me just first, yes, Justin, please. Let me just dive in the next. But first,
No, I did the wrong thing like Lama Geely. I pressed the wrong icon. Sorry.
Don't worry. Don't worry. nothing lost. So let me just, I'm going to just reshare my screen. And it is that we see if I can. Let's see. Yes, Jen, that's oh, let me answer the questions first. I have a couple of questions, and I'll just reshare again. So there is a lot of questions, right? Let me go first. What is the difference between passing into paranirvana and rainbow body? It's a great question. So you have to understand that while people tend to say, oh, Buddhists want nirvana, right? Like out of hand, something like this. This is kind of a oversimplification, and this comes into a time where see most things that people tend to quote today of Buddhism still to this day are things like T. Wright Davis, translation of the Pali Canon, or especially a lot of the early readings from Western authors like Schopenhauer or Freud, right? Freud has a wonderful text about nirvana in which he gets everything wrong. But not his fault. He was working with the sources that he had available to this day, right? Sorry, give me a second. Apologies. It's very cold here. Now we're all in that a little bit of. So the problem was that for them, the main access they had were translations made by the Pali Text Society, and we're talking mid-19th centuries, right? In which they tend to do the thing that most people do when they have a new field of study, which is universalize everything. All of Buddhism is saying about this. All of it. In actuality, just one part of the Theravada was the one who they had access to was saying this. But if you look at Buddhist history, you will find that there is a lot of difference of opinion on what constitutes being a Buddha, right? So there is a big fight happening in the early days of the Common Era about is Buddha someone who is a monk, someone who's not a monk, is someone who is there for all beings as a way to inspire them, is someone who's actually working for all beings. And you can see, for example, this in the Vimalakirti Nirdesh Sutra, or for example in the Prajna Paramitas, the 8,000 light, right? And you can see kind of resolved in the Sadharma Kundarika, the Lotus Sutra, which is a lot later on. So there was all this fight. If you're taking Paranirvana, not as a kind of common way of saying he died, which is something a lot of schools does, but as the actual technical term from the Stavirabhada Theravada way, when you become enlightened, after the Buddha, you become an Arhat, and this is your Nirvana. Technically, what it happens is that you stop producing karma. You still have karma, which is the karma of your body, the karma you have accumulated up to that point, but you become enlightened, their karma stops. Then, when you die, when the karma of the body is finally exhausted, then you reach the paranirvana, right? At that moment on, you have become liberated, you have gone away from the wheel of samsara. However, for most of the Mahayana, this is breaking your bodhisattva vows, right? And this has to do with a lot of how the Theravada and the Mahayana view the different elements, the constituents of the body, the skandhas. For the Mahayana, both the idea of self, but also the rest of the world is empty. Whereas in the Theravada, it's not that's not the case. So by being empty, which means that essentially there's not a separation of even a provisional self and others. Right? What happens is that if I want to become enlightened, like that Rico wants to become enlightened, someone like Lavagila has to become enlightened. Therefore, someone like you, Rudy, has to become enlightened. Because there is no difference between the image that you have from myself and myself in the ultimate level, right? They're all empty. Therefore, I cannot pass into paranirvana in the sense of the Theravada, because I broke my gum. Yes, this part, let's call it this set of skandhas gets liberated, but you guys get left behind. Therefore, what I need to do is I need to become liberated in a way in which I can help the liberation of all things. In that way, the rainbow body is myself reversing all the elements into a way in which I can become a Buddha that can emanate a million forms, right? Which is essentially what a lineage of embodiments is. If you accept and believe that, for example, myself are a nation of Dudjom Lingpa, which is an emanation of Dudjom, so on and so on. Essentially, what it means is someone at some point in time became enlightened, right? You can call it Padmasambhava, you can call it Tsendosam, whichever it is, and know every action that happens because of that moment of enlightenment. Does that make sense? Yes, Lamajide.
Lama, I was wondering if you could simply contrast for a single moment more. I know this is hopefully not too tangential, empty of self in the views of the Theravada, because empty of self and interdependence and the self of Theseus is a very tricky concept to be so concise for us.
So the idea is that in the Theravada, there's of course a lot of schools within the Theravada, right? So let me talk a little bit about the Sarvastivada, for example. So what it says is that there is these particles, which are called dharmas, right? Dharmas in the same sense that we call dharma and teaching, right? Phenomena. So these are let's call it atoms, right? And what we are is a collection of atoms, right? These 5 collections of atoms becomes the 5 skandhas. But the atoms themselves are real. And this becomes, at some point in Theravada, something that is very strange. Not so much in the modern Theravada, but we're talking about the moment where this was being fought with the Mahayana, in which there are nirvanic atoms and there are samsaric atoms. So in that kind of materialistic view, what you should do is change your samsaric atoms into nirvanic atoms, right? To the point that they were like, you do it with abacus. You had like tables of nirvanic or samsaric actions, and then you would add, hey, you know, I don't know, I killed a dog today, that's samsaric. But I helped 3 monks attain enlightenment, that's nirvanic. Oh, look, this is a -30, but I'm +40. Oh, hey, I became enlightened. I just didn't see it. It's like, I just did that. And Bashubanu especially is very critical of it, and he's like, this is stupid, right? What you're taking is taking a metaphor and giving it, refining into an objective reality. That is why he has all this fight with Sarvastivada and Vaibhashika, and he says, what you are taking as a mechanical thing, as just a mechanical material thing, it's nothing else but this a concept, right? That was useful. It's useful enough to point to the way, but it's not like you actually, you know, take your arm off and put a Buddha arm, and now you're Buddha, right? And of course, this is a very great simplification. There is a more complex way of showing this within the, for example, Sarvastivada, in which the atoms all the time die. Therefore, there is a window in which, depending of whether you stand or not, you can replace them. But it's a more mechanical way. I don't know if this makes sense. The main thing to understand is that we're not in that position, but we're in a very Madhyamaka position of everything is empty, yet apparent. And then, yet you were saying, why translate one of the teacher's work and filter most of it instead of translating a teacher you like more? Well, this is a great question, Jet, and has to do with the politics of Dharma. Dharma and politics have been entwined from the beginning. I would say that Dharma is also a political position, from the moment that you say that there is no caste in a place where there is caste, you're making a position. It's just like, no, in the US, when you say people have to go, if people have to be segregated and have to go to the back of the bus, and the front of the bus are different, and you see someone, like this famous act, when someone sits in a different place, this is a position, right? So what happens is that there is all this movement constantly of trying to legitimize things through different schools. And when someone becomes very famous from outside of that schools, there's always the case, and Buddhism, not only Tibetan Buddhism, like the whole Buddhism has done this, I'm going to read that person through this other lens, which is okay. It's a way in which you produce your own version of it. And the equivalent of this happens a lot in France, for example, where philosophers read one philosopher to the lens of another, right? Famously, for example, Deleuze and Nietzsche. The Nietzsche that Deleuze creates, for me, it's wonderful to the point that I cannot read Nietzsche, the original text, without thinking in Deleuzean categories, right? And this, what happens is that, for me, the Deleuzean interpretation of Nietzsche is always more present than, let's call it, I don't know, the Hegelian interpretation of Nietzsche, right? And this is a way in which schools fight for tolerance. This is very common. For example, Sakya Pandita would do this a lot. Would take Indian tantras, would interpret them in his own way, and they were so good that basically became like the way to do it. And you can see this, for example, in the Gorampa versus Gelug, in which Gorampa criticized the Gelug so effectively that all his books were burned, and for a long time you couldn't read in a Gelug monastery anything by Gorampa. It was just not done. You could read about demons and that was okay, but Gorampa was like Voldemort, right? This is the real difference. Sometimes people take authors from other places and they make it their own, and it's not good or bad. It is just what it is. My personal feeling is that the things you can buy in Amazon today, I have of course bought them and read them to make the translation, are great if you like the Gelug, but if you are not a Gelug, then the way in which they are presented is very good, right? Which is not good or bad. It's just what it is. So let me reshare and let's go over the two texts. So far, so good. Any other question?
Pardon me, Lama. I thought I saw the question about rainbow body versus normal parinikama, and I just didn't want that any explication on rainbow body was not
Sorry?
explicate. If you could make a simple comment on the rainbow
I
body.
already said it. I think I already answered that.
On the full of the parinirvana, yes, but I didn't expect not to have any contrast with rainbow body. I'm sorry, Lama. I just didn't want the student's question to not hear about rainbow body.
Right, but we cannot say anything besides that it's a reversal of the elements, because rainbow body, of course, is Dzogchen, and it requires translation. So we have to leave it at that.
Sufficient. Thank you, Lama.
So let's go over the text. I translated 2 songs, and I'm going to read over them, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about it, right? So you get the speech. So the first is called Instructions to an Errant Student. Emma Ho, song, connected to me by karma and aspiration. Come here. Look now at the manner of your past conduct and behavior. You are not even following the prophetic teachings. Though entrusted to younger brothers and sisters like an old dog, look again now, with the eyes still watching bleeding. Your own purpose remains unfulfilled. That much is decided. Though struck by the 200 weapons of an evil master in the innocent, after wandering far, you circle back in attachment to bad places. The long distance cannot be crossed. That rope has snapped. Though all may be joyful in the monk's state of renouncing samsara, the wretched one wonders as a monk who has learned the sutras and deceives. Is there one who resembles a non-mind in a human body? When the degraded old monk dies like a pig in the dirt, the mind will be at ease, a wretched place, critical, far away. To the shelterless old monk is beaten like an old dog, there is compassion. The misery has no place to put it long. The family who cherished and raised you has risen as an enemy. When the evil master of one's support turns into an executioner, is there truly a genuine king of prophetic teachings? Is there no need for any other prophecy, seeing the red-handed killer of father and mother? Tears will spill uncontrollably on the chest of sorrow. Even without degradation, if left as a lump of coal, tears have squeezed out from sad eyes like juice. If an arrow of mine is shot for the rewards of good deeds done, it might at least cause the wretched body to leave the ground. To everyone speaks about others behind their back, truly no one comes to speak it to the face. If one drinks the beneficial harsh word like medicine, hold each year's food provision dignity, and continually practice the meaning of overcoming disgrace and bitterness, the force of karma, Dudjom transformed elsewhere, has shot an arrow of loving sorrow towards his breast. Thus spoke Dudjom. So you can see right from the start that he, even here where he tries to be like the most, like, this is him as his most mainstream Buddhist. He has this student who basically has given up on practice. And he wants to impress, hey, you know, the classical way, life is short, the chances of having a human birth are very low, please practice. That is what he's trying to say here. But he's Dudjom Lingpa, so he's talking about murderers. No, I'm being beaten by an evil teacher and so on. Excuse me. So this is so fun. So what he says is, okay, he starts by saying, look, come here. Look what you have been doing. You have been basically behaving as you didn't understand karma. And this is something that is very interesting, because if there is someone who, from the outside, you could say, he doesn't care about karma, this is Dudjom Lingpa, right? Someone who goes and murders people when they're asleep, this is Dudjom Lingpa. But this is not the case. He does this because he understands very clearly that by leaving karma, by leaving the people commit more murders and rapes and slavery, the karma is going to be generated is worse. So he'd rather take the bad karma himself rather to keep them doing it. So he says, look, I give you the prophetic teachings, right? In this sense, I'm using prophetic, mean the visionary, right? But not in the sense of I had a vision, just a vision. I put prophetic here to translate that because it means I know what's going to happen to you. I have seen your fate, he's saying, right? I have seen it. And even though I entrusted you for you to watch out and to teach them, you are like someone who's dead watching the living. That you have become dead in life. You have lost the teachings. And your own purpose is unfulfilled, right? And even though you know this, even though you know what you're doing is wrong, that is struck by 200 weapons of an evil master, like an evil guy, right? And I talked a little bit about this the other day. It's someone who's a false guy. It's the worst thing you can happen in Tantra. The worst thing, right? Is someone who deceives you and tells you, no, you know, the teachings are like, you can do whatever you want. The other day I was looking at someone who was like, no, it's Tantra say this, but it doesn't matter, you know, you can do whatever you want. You can be a black magician. That is a false guy, right? And you will find with this a lot of sadness and a lot of harm. But he says, even though you are doing this and you know that your phone is the files guide of bad habits, you still go back to it. You cannot cut it. Right? And he says the long distance cannot be crossed. The rope has done. You have lost the chance. You have lost the chance. You were having everything set up, and you have lost the chance. Why is that? Right? Then he says, yes, even though you may be a monk, right? Even if you really renounce samsara, everything will be joyous. But if you do not renounce samsara, it doesn't not matter that you're a monk. Just have lost the sutras. You're someone who deceives, who shows himself as dharmic, but in reality is not. Right? And you only will find respite when you die. It's terrible. This is terrible. Like, you will die like a pig in the dirt. Again, Dudjom Lingpa. And even then, he says, but if you have some dharma, even if you're beaten like an old dog, there will be still compassion. There will see a chance to do it. So he says, even if the people who supports you, turn against you, the family who has raised you lovingly now becomes your enemy. The people who support your practice, remember this, monk, right? People who paid for your practice now become an executioner, right? Says, what is this? You're going to call me, what should I do? What is the prophecy? What is that? There's no need for prophecy. If this has happened, right? You should regret. This is a very poetic way, he says. Seeing the red-handed killer of father and mother, which is yourself, is your own bad habits, it's your own ignorance. Tears will spill uncontrollably from the chest of sorrow. Right? But even if you have this in your life, even if you have crashed in your life, even if you have knowing that you could do better and have done worse, even then, if you connect with just the good things you have done, there is a chance that this corpse might live and run. Even dead, you have a chance, so to speak. And says it doesn't matter, and this is probably something that he knew that it's in it, right? He gossiped and he talked about a lot of the people and says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you had done. If you have bad-mouthed, he's probably talking about himself in this, right? He knows that the student was talking shit about him. He says, doesn't matter if you drink the medicine of the harsh words, right? If you try to hold on what you can, and you start practicing even now that you have lost everything, this might shoot an arrow, and this might move you, at least a little bit. So this is my loving message to you, he says. It's a very harsh message, but he says, right? Loving sorrow. I'm going to send you my loving sorrow. He hates what you have become, that you have let yourself become, but there's still love there. Therefore, listen to me and move. So this wonderful letter for me, it's something that you don't expect Dudjom Lingpa to do. Yes, of course, he's still Dudjom Lingpa. He's not going to say, you know, I am worried that you are not taking your vows serious enough and you're not understanding the wonders of man. He's going to say, you are like a dead corpse looking at the living, and you're going to die like a pig in the dirt with everyone you love turning into your enemies and beating you to death. But still there is a way. My arrow of love, because also he cannot say, I send you my love. He's going to shoot you with an arrow through your heart with love. And he's going to shut you. And with this charge of love, listen to me one last time. Hey, move. Do this. Right? So in a way, it's a very traditionally Buddhist. I have seen letters of like that 10 million times in Buddhism. From even the letter to the king, the Surleka, right? Of Nagarjuna. to letters like this in Theravada, in the Therigatas, in the Japanese Buddhism, in Ikkyu, in Dogen, so many letters of teachers saying to the students, hey, you lost the way. That's okay, you can find it again. I believe in you. But I wanted to present a letter in Dudjom's own voice, which is, of course, full of corpses and weapons and death, of course. Right? Does that make sense? Excellent. So this is the, let's say, the standard letter, right? You have lost your way, but I'm here for you, of any Buddhist teacher to any student in Dudjom Lingpa's voice. But then I want to give another letter, a letter that speaks more about not so much his own voice, but also the mystical qualities, right? The way in which he sees it. And this is going to be a shorter letter, but it's going to be a lot more dense in meaning. This is to not any student, but one which happens a lot. He has a wonderful chut, which I think never has been translated, yet translated. It has volumes and volumes of chut teachings. And he has this wonderful student called Yanli, which I think he's one of the best practitioners ever he found. And he writes a letter trying to help him along. And he says, I prostrate to unwavering faith to Kuntum Sanko, the primordial natural state. If you, frightened by the terror of lower realms, and are one seeking liberation, take to heart view and meditation of all pervading meaning. Just as the nighttime in the dream state, the empty nature, the vast expanse of space. Just as the star reflections arise in the ocean, the container and the contents, the diverse appearance of sense pleasures. All phenomena appearing as tangible material forms, like stars reflected in water, not other than the water itself. The diverse appearances are not other than one's own ground. Likewise, the waking appearances of self and other, do all appear as tangible material things, then nature is the emptiness of non-material space. The Dharmadhatu spreads as space itself. If one gains confidence in space, manifests it directly. The king of all views, meditation is unsurpassed. Awareness is the eye is awareness. Look at those who perceive in dream and boredom. Therefore, all samsara and nirvana is self-appearance. Gain confidence in recognizing this state. Release body and speech activities into complete ease. Do not set the wheel of feet turning through kingdoms. One pointedly plunge into the essential practice. A fruit of manifest liberation will be gained. There is no oral structure superior to this. Thus, this too was spoken by Dudjom Dorje at the request of the Chok particular commissioner, Yali, might be holy purpose. So this short letter, basically, it's the whole Prajna Paramita path into Mahamudra, right? Which is why I wanted to translate to you. It's extremely profound. I'm going to try to unpack it a little bit for you guys. First, it starts with, as any great teaching, instead of being a more general, like Buddhist thing, with prostrations to the Guru. In this case, the Guru is Kuntum Sanko, which means Samanta Bhadra, the own Guru, right? The Adi Buddha of Dzogchen. He prostrates to the Guru. And then he says, remember, Yanli was a very good practitioner of Chut. And in Chut, what you do is you go to horrible places and you offer to your body to the demons. And there is this whole thing with dances and songs and visualizations, and sometimes even in energetic substances, in which you take to feel that you're being put apart and replaced as a deity. Now, this is probably the most common shamanic experience for all of humanity, right? As Milkea Eliane, has a wonderful book, a little bit dated right now because it's from the mid 1930s, called Shamanism and the Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy, in which he lies this thesis that this experience of being cut up to pieces and put back together is the main way in which you become initiated. And if you have Wang Cheng's, if you have Anuttara Yoga empowerments, you know how this is played. That's reality. But in this case, he's talking about someone who's going through this, and he's going through this in a very real manner, right? Because when you go through one of these experiences, which I have gone through a lot of time, you feel that you're being taken apart. And it's a very terror-filled moment, right? It's terrific in the sense that it's terrorific, but it is terrific like this. So he says, first of all, don't stop. What you're doing, and this is something my own students probably have heard me so many times. They come with me with something horrible. Oh, what happened this? And I'm like, oh, this is great. Don't stop. Keep doing it. Because this is Tantra. This is Tantra. Tantra happens like this. Remember always the story of another of our line of emanations, Virupa, where his teacher died, and he started having the dreams that meant that he was going to get enlightened, and they were all horrible dreams. As he was like, what is this happening to me? Right? Why am I dreaming of being chopped up to pieces and being swallowed by the deities? This was a great sign because there was no one to tell him that. He almost quit everything, right? So this is a great thing. This Dudjom Lingpa saying this is what it should happen. But now remember the view of this, because if you go through it thinking, oh no, I'm going to get chopped up, and you generate this attachment, you're going to reject it. And he says, just as nighttime in the dream state, the empty nature, the vast of space. This line tells you his whole thesis here. All that we're experiencing is empty space. It is just as a dream. It is a dream. It's just a different kind of dream. But you can think in the dream, when you dream at night, you don't see, unless you're practicing the dream yoga, right? Darshana, you are not thinking, hey, no, I am dreaming. You feel things as real. You get the feeling that is that this is something that is real, and you get anxious, you get scared, you get angry, you get happy, right? So just as nighttime in the dream state, it says, this is all empty. There's nowhere which is settled. It says even more, just as stars arise in the ocean, the container and the contents, diverse appearance, all phenomena appear as tangible material forms, like stars reflecting in water, no other than the water themselves. If you see stars in the water, you're not seeing the stars, you're seeing the water reflecting the stars. And this is just like the image of the crystal, right? That happens out in Dzogchen. The crystal can reflect everything. The water can reflect everything. But it never stops being water. What you're seeing is your own mind. It's mine, not even your own, right? It's just mine. It's a play of awareness. He says, diverse appearances, the things that appear, they're no different than grown of being. They're no different than the experience of mind. Likewise, when you wake up, you feel that you exist are also an illusion, right? Even when you wake up, through all appearances, the nature is the emptiness of the non-material space. The nature of yourself and the nature of the space and the nature of your dreams are one. The person that you talk in your dreams is as real as you, which means they're not real, right? He says the main confusion that we have is that we think our dreams are not real, but we are. right? Or sometimes even worse, our dreams ourselves are real, right? Oh, I had this dream, and in this dream, how many people have you know in spiritual paths that they had this dream, and this dream changes their lives? And strangely enough, the way in which the dream changed their lives is the way they wanted their lives to be all the time, right? It's never like, oh, I'm a banker, and now I had a dream, and now I'm going to leave everything and go be a mechanic in the Florida Everglades, fixing up airboats. It's always, oh, I'm a banker, and they had a spiritual dream, and therefore buy my new app, which will help you become as successful and spiritual as myself. It's always the same. It's always the same. So he says, no, everything is true. So your experience of terror is as illusory as your experience of you. Therefore, relax. He says, awareness is the eye. The eye is awareness, which is the same as saying form is emptiness and emptiness is form, right? Whatever you are perceiving is just awareness. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It does not change. And he says, look who those who perceive in deep and Bardo. The people you meet, yourself, the ring, and the rest of the Bardos, are just awareness. All of samsara and nirvana are just that. This is something we're talking before of Theravada, right? This is something that is not, didn't start at the beginning of Buddhism. This insight that samsara and nirvana are just as phantasm as you are, a phantasmagorical, right? Would say, are just apparitions as you are. This is an insight that took a lot of time to be formulated like this. Now people kind of tend to overlook it and say, oh yes, I heard my teacher say samsara and nirvana is the same. This was not always the case. Buddhism took thousands of years of argument to get to this insight. That even nirvana, even the Buddhas themselves are ghosts, specters, and we have our own desires. That's why the talk that I gave the last time in Mexico was called putting makeup on a ghost, right? They're just ghosts that you like even more. When you see people talking about Buddhism and transhumanism, for example, what you will find is that people usually what they want is a better samsara. They want to live forever. They want to have bodies that do not become old and decay. They want to live like, and I totally understand. Who wouldn't like to be like a inhumanly forever young and beautiful, right? And strong. But the Buddha is saying, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. And Dudjom Lingpa is saying here, in confidence, recognizing that this samsara, is just a dream. Once you do this, release everything. Once you understand this, everything, you don't need to liberate anything. It's a dream. How can you renounce something that does not exist? Right? He said, do not set the wheel of feet turning through kingdoms. Why is he saying this? This is a very old turn of phrase. There is in the Tantras a city called Harikela that happens in the Gobi Desert. You know Gobi Desert, north of Tibet, right? Very dry desert, a lot of mirages, right? Appear when you are dehydrated. What happens is that if you lose your path and you become lost, you're almost sure to die, even today. But in the case that somebody found you, this happened. Gobi Desert was part of the Silk Road, right? So you will find a lot of people there. Some people told about seeing a city of Gandharvas and Apsaras, of beautiful divine beings. And then when they were just going to go there, when they were about to step, they got rescued. They were dying. You understand? They were being dehydrated and hallucinating. But then they spent their whole life feeling this melancholy, this desire of going back to the traffic city. And what he's saying, Dudjom Lingpa, here is, you are one and feeling melancholy for something that never existed. Wake up. Do not go there. Plunge yourself into practice. And the practice is recognizing that this is also a dream. Right? A fruit of manifest liberation will be gained, he says. And if you understand this, there's no oral instruction that's superior to it. And I totally agree. If you understand this short song, there's nothing else that we can teach you. But there's always the difficulty of trying to put this into practice. Therefore, we have all the rest of Buddhism. So, I hope that you have enjoyed the sharing of songs. And let me finish and open for any question with the following aspiration. May we all quickly understand this last instruction, gently, and quickly put it in practice for to liberate all beings without exception. And failing that, if we cannot put it into practice, may we always be connected to the rest of practices, right? That are wonderful and liberating, and through this we realize the one instruction of the nature of samsara nirvana, that is the same and at the same time a dream. Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Lama.
Thank you, Lama.
So, did you enjoy this small teaching of Dudjom Lingpa? Excellent. Any question regarding this, regarding either his life or his teachings? Yes, Lamaji.
Of all the crazy adventures that Sri Dudjom Lingpa had, what was the craziest? Just unhinged.
It is very, this is a case in which is very difficult, because in every single page of his work there is it's very difficult. I would say that probably his bizarre kind of terror to the Rakshasas gate to go to Sandor Parley, because you know that in the lineage it's held that Padmasambhava never died, right? He went first to Tibet, then he went to Bhutan, then he departed to Madagascar, where Sandor Parley is located, and he became the Lord of the Rakshasas. He's there living as the king of the Rakshasas and bringing the Rakshasas to Dharma. And so Dudjom Lingpa wanted to go there. So he basically, Dudjom Lingpa just crashed the party. Just went there saying, which one of you bastards is king? And basically started fighting everyone until he found Padmasambhava. And when he found Padmasambhava, he was like, hey. And Padmasambhava was like, hey. It is so bizarre. But everything is very difficult, because like there is like the 10 million fights that he has with witches, warlocks. Like the time that he stops, the time that he stopped a couple of armies fighting just by scaring everyone off. Right? Very fun people. I would say that it's difficult for me. Sandor probably is the most bizarre one. But here's what I would say about Dudjom Lingpa is that people tend to think that when they cannot do this version of it, that kind of Dudjom Lingpa didn't have like stable mind, like a conscious, a moral conscious, like most people there. But my feeling is that he really had one. It's just that he did the opposite of whatever it says. He would say it and said, what is like something like a good Buddhist would do? And then he would do the actual opposite, right? Something like, but at the same time, do it in a way in which he showed that the other thing, the correct thing, was actually a little bit of attention. So a very difficult person to pin down, Lama Jili. I think that, and I think that also he arose like this because Buddhism had become too established, and this is a risk that can happen. When it stops being something that's liberative in one's life and becomes this idea of no, liberation is so far away. You will never, perhaps in 10 million lives, or only high people. It was the lowest of low, like a brutish, bizarre shaman, right? The Nimas didn't want him at all. He was like not really told us pretty much until the end of his life, and yet his first emanation was the head of the Nyingma. So it is like this. It is like this. It is up and down, Samsara. I don't know if I answered the question. Thank you. Any other question, guys? Okay. So what to do if you like to know a little bit more about Dudjom Lingpa? So we're going to start teaching slowly things about Dudjom Lingpa. My advice is that if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty with us, right? Of course, there's other avenues. There's Dzogchen, there's all other things. The idea is that we're going to try to teach as many things as we can, but my advice is start working towards the P1 and P2, which are our beginner and intermediate levels, because everything it really falls over P3 and up level. Dudjom Lingpa, like Dudul Dorje, like most of the beings in this chain of emanations, have very little introductory teachings. They wrote mostly for other Buddhists that want to go the last mile into enlightenment. So while we're going to be able to teach a couple more songs probably, or I'm going to write a sanitized, not a Samaya breaking version of his older autobiography, right? In which there's not like, oh, today I did this, and this is how to kill 20 people with poison. I will just, in any case, say he writes a story about how to kill people with poison, but I don't want to release something that's poison menus for everyone else. So what I'm going to do is probably going to be the only things that are going to be available for people with zero experience contact. But for people who have enough maturity, right, to train with us, or who can meet and interview, as we put on the page, that are stable enough and mature enough, we'll be more than happy to share it. So yes, Lama Jili, one we have in your hand.
Last question. Are you going to release the text on how to slay and subjugate all the demons?
Not release, like open release, nothing. Probably
No, not openly. But I mean on the path.
Oh yeah. It is, yes, it is that we share. Like we did this to share to people. If I wanted to just read them myself, I already read it. So I would have kept for myself.
You already know.
So yeah, we're going to release everything, right? The thing is probably with all the teachers, there's going to be with all the teachings that if I leave it long enough to translate, I already finished translating Dudul Dorje and Dudjom Lingpa. Now I'm going to start working on another one. At some point, probably not everyone is going to be able to hold everything because it's a lot. My feeling is that, especially you Lamas, some of you will hold some things, some of other people will hold something else, right? But because we're a Gula, that's okay. Whenever you find a student, let's say, Gula Majila, you have a student that, let's say the Lama Scott holds MIPAM, for example, right? You find students who need more of a MIPAM approach, you send it to Lama Scott. You find someone who has more of a Dudjom Lingpa approach, and Lama Jili holds this, you send it to Lama Jili, right? It is that you want to hold everything, and you can hold everything, we'll more than happy to give it. In practice, my feeling is we will kind of have to. So there's not like a bottleneck that is now, right? in which there's just one people to give everything else. Because if not, then we go over the problems of availability at time to train, the usual issues that we have in transmission. Yes, sorry, Scott.
I was just trying to ask if there are people who have not had it yet that you might be willing to say, give the Dudjom Lingpa Guru Yoga again.
Oh, yes, yes, I will be more than happy. There's just one thing. That is a very wrathful Guru Yoga. So yes, I would give it. Yes, I would be more than happy to give it again. My only request is that we interview people before, right? Not because I don't want to give it, but because let me tell you what happened when I got it the first time. Basically, I was going to the bus doing the mantras the day after I got it, and the bus crashed, and nobody was hurt. It was the most bizarre thing. But when I was doing the last mantra, the bus crashed, and basically we were almost all compacted. You know, the seats, every single window was broken. Nobody was hurt. It was the most bizarre thing ever. And that day, I had like 10 other things happening for 1 week to another. To point that I almost did something I never do, which was do a talisman, kind of tone it down, which I almost never do in my life. But it was a little bit overwhelming. So if somebody is up to that, we'll interview them to make sure that we do not make someone kill himself, kill herself. But yes, yes, more than happy to give it again. Excellent. Well, if there's not any question, we're just in time. I will send to everyone here both the recording and the text, of course, at the presentation. So if you have any other question, please feel to reach out either in Discord, right, with Scott, or through WhatsApp or whatever media you have, and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you, everyone, and have a great Sunday.